gentlemen, I presume this is to enable us to sweep Britain clean of socialism.
And I make this promise to everyone in Britain. You will not be left on your own in this. We are all in this together, and we are going to get through this together. We will carry out Britain's unavoidable deficit reduction plan in a way that strengthens and unites our country.
It's great to be here in Liverpool. Labour Liverpool. A generation ago, a Labour leader came to our conference to condemn the behaviour of a Labour council in Liverpool. Today I come here proud of this great city and proud of our Labour council.
I'll tell you what happens with impossible promises. You start with far-fetched resolutions. They are then pickled into a rigid dogma, a code. And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around the city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers.
Liverpool had had a long history of industrial struggle going back to really the turn of the century. There'd been the dock strikes in 1911. There'd been the police strike in 1919. A whole series of industrial struggles throughout the 1920s and 30s, and by the 1980s, Liverpool had gone through a period of deindustrialisation, where a large number of factories had been closed. So you had growing unemployment, you had a willingness by people to fight back against that growing unemployment, and of course the coming to power of the Thatcher government and the attacks that were being made on working people, particularly things like the miners' strike, had meant that in society generally there was more of a politicisation. But in Liverpool in particular, there'd been a whole period of militant struggle, so that there was already that kind of political ferment, and again particularly within the Labour Party itself. Now Liverpool had a declining population, so that the amount of money that was being raised in revenue from rates and other local taxes and things was going down. But you still needed to keep the infrastructure of Liverpool going, the roads, the sewers and all that sort of stuff, the parks and gardens, all that still needed to be. And with the cuts that were taking place from the national government, it put Liverpool in a really difficult position.
Liverpool was in the middle of a really big depression. There were terrible unemployment and real poverty. The factories were closing, almost a factory a night on the news. You'd hear another factory closing, and there'd been occupations of those factories. There'd been real fight back to try and keep the jobs. Mechanos, all Dunlops, all kinds of people all fighting for their jobs, but the job loss was relentless. And then you had the Liberal Council, and the Liberal Council was introducing cuts well before it happened anywhere else in the country. So you could see it in the schools, you could see it in the services from the council, like social services, and very obviously you could see it in the parks. The parks went from being really beautiful to being dirty, nasty, dangerous places. And you could just see the damage that was being done to Liverpool. And then as well as that, you had all the history of what had happened over race in the riots in Liverpool, and the fight back against the oppression that was going on by a very out of order police force at that time. So the youth of the city was up in arms. The working people were facing massive redundancies. People were genuinely poor, and there was a real anger about the place. So it didn't come out of the blue. You know, we were a natural consequence of what had been happening before.
Also, when you went into to sign on, say, there were people there that, you know, you could see the shame that they were out of work. You know, they'd worked all their lives and they felt ashamed that they had to queue and ask for money. They'd always earn the money. And to be honest, it was pretty heartbreaking to see adults just brought down to this level. It made you want to fight, you know, it really did. It made you angry. It made you resolute to do something when you saw the effects of some of the decisions that the Tories were making. I mean, it was bad enough before, but it was horrendous after they came in.
Margaret Thatcher had come to power, so there was a bit of unease about, you know, the Tories being in government and things going to change. Definitely a big sea change about people feeling unhappy, you know, about unemployment. You'd seen in Liverpool the closure of Tate and Lyle's, and big factories had closed in Liverpool. So a lot of my friends who I went to school with who'd gone to work in factory work were all unemployed, whole families of them. At the time I worked in the DSS in Croxteth, and I remember the figure then. Croxteth had youth unemployment at 92%. In 82, 83, it was the worst time for young people. I missed it by about 5 years, but the generation who left school 5 years after me, they weren't going to work or into jobs. I could have picked 2 or 3 jobs the week after I left school with some O-levels. People were leaving school 5 years after me with more O-levels. They weren't picking any jobs, they were just signing on. And it was a real waste. It was almost like a semi-generation wasted. Some of those people you meet today, and they never recovered from that, whether it was the confidence or they never kept up the skills. But sometimes you'll meet people and they've not really worked in a long-term relationship with a job where they've enjoyed and felt they've given something to society or to someone. They've never ever had that, and generally there'll be that youth of sort of the 80s, which I think is quite sad really. It's just lost generations.
The first thing that comes to mind is in the 80s, when you look at politics in this city, there's got to be the fight of Liverpool City Council and of the 47, or well originally it was 49 councillors. Unfortunately we've had 2 deceased before the fight was over. That fight, I think, still is a beacon to many on the left across the country. All the things that we believe should be done under socialism, we tried to do under capitalism in Liverpool. So right from the start we knew it was going to end in a confrontation.
On one occasion, 10,000 dock workers came out on strike in support of the policies of the Liverpool City Council. That's the level of support that we were able to develop and to mobilise as a result of our policy of appealing to the widest possible strata of the working class. And it makes nonsense of this notion that a small group of militants took control of the Liverpool City Council. That 47 was based upon the widest possible support.
At the beginning of the 80s, you'd had a number of Labour councils up and down the country all agreeing that they were going to carry out the same kind of policies. There was Lambeth, a number of other councils. So it looked as though there was going to be this alliance of Labour councils that would be confronting the Tory government.
Well, what happened was, when we first started, there was a whole host of councils, Lambeth and Sheffield, Manchester, some in Scotland, all over. Basically, there was none opposed to having a go. But then it ended up with just a handful who were willing to have a go. And we met regularly as a group to try and get some sort of organisation. But one by one, they fell by the wayside. We were basically isolated. We were being attacked by trade union leaders, by the Labour Party. And one of the things that they were all saying is, the time is not right to have a go. Well, I was only 34, I'm 60 now, and I'm still waiting. When's the time going to be right? If I live that long, I'll probably be 120. Maybe the time will be here, but the time was right then. The time is always right now, not sometime in the future. And all that is an excuse to do nothing.
So, the council was in uproar, really, because from 83, they got the majority in 83, and one of the first issues that sort of got people organised was the 1,000 redundancies that had been announced. I think that was in 1982. I could be wrong, but I think it was 1982, when it was Lib Lab coalition type thing. Labour got its majority on the back of that. So it came in straight away to fighting redundancies, no rent, no rates increases. We had rates then to make up for Tory cuts. That was the slogan, no rent or rate increases to make up for Tory cuts. And it was jobs and services, jobs and services, jobs and services. Couldn't think of what to say jobs and services.
When we were trying to get elected, it was made extremely clear that we were going to stand on the basis of no rent and rate increases to compensate for Tory cuts, and that it would result in us fighting for money from the government. And that was made very clear, and the people voted in the thousands for us, and that vote increased each year that we would empower them.
One of the things that I've learned from it is, you can decide which way you're going as politicians, whether you're going to have a go of fighting or you're not going to have a go of fighting, or you set yourself goals. And we set ourselves goals of not putting rents and rates up to compensate for Tory cuts, building houses, sports centres in Liverpool. Now, people were saying there's no money. There's plenty of money around, and there's plenty of people wanting to lend money. French banks, Japanese banks, banks in America, there's all these people. And like people say, you did illegal things. We never borrowed any illegal money, but we did have a few tricks under our sleeve. And what one of them was that we had the mortgages we were giving mortgages for people who were buying council houses and buying private houses as well. We were giving mortgages. So we had all this money, but it was just frozen because you couldn't do anything with it. So we sold the mortgages to the Bank of France, and we knew that the government wouldn't be very happy about it. So we waited till 5 o'clock Friday to sell the mortgages. And what it meant was, it didn't make any difference. They just took the debt on. We managed exactly the same. There was no French involvement in running the mortgages, but we managed to get capital to build more houses. And what happened was, we did it 5 o'clock Friday because we knew that the government would try and have a go at us. But over the weekend, they actually brought a bill in to stop anyone else doing it by 8 o'clock Monday morning. So if anyone says, we can't pass that bill on wheelchairs, or we can't pass that bill on mental health because it'll take too long, if they wanted to, they can do it over the weekend when Parliament isn't even sitting. So that's the sort of thing that people have got to remember. And we were getting phone calls Monday morning from just about every council in the country, including Tory councils, asking us how we did it and how we got the money released. So that was the difference. And what we did, we decided we were going to build houses, and we went out and found the money, and the money was there. And we built more houses than the rest of the country put together, than every single council in the country. So if the will was there, the money was there, and the facility was there to do it.
We built 5,000 houses. We opened 6 new sports centres. We opened 6 nursery classes when other councils were closing and cutting back on nursery facilities. We created jobs for the local authority instead of sacking workers. We expanded their services. We introduced some of the best working conditions for local authority workers.
The people who were in the demolition areas got invitations to come to the town hall, and then they were then shown with an officer from the council the different types of housing that we were thinking of and what they thought. And our houses were 3-bedroomed houses, centrally heated, with gardens and parking places and proper walls around the gardens. They were good houses that stand today and are a tribute to it. And the slums, as best we could, the slums came down.
And you got people moving in their families, and there was little 1-bedroom bungalows, so you got elderly people who'd been on the waiting list years with medical grounds. We only had a certain amount of bungalows in the stock, so it was dead men's shoes, as we used to call it. The only time a bungalow became vacant was when they died. Nobody moved out of a bungalow to go elsewhere. When you got it, you kept it till your dying day, basically. And because we built, little bungalows where single people could move into, it was great. It got a lot of people off the medical waiting list, gave them what they needed. And the bit in Old Swansea Estate off Rathbone Road is a great indication of that, because it's got houses with families and a good mix. And we moved people in who'd been on the waiting list for 4 or 5 years.
There was a lady called Caroll, who was an expert on public housing. She'd been all over the world. She'd looked at different schemes in Sweden, in Denmark, Australia, United States, and she came back and said Liverpool's housing was one of the finest developments of local authority housing that she'd ever seen in her life. Paid enormous tribute to that particular policy. And the spin-off from that, of the construction programme, not only the houses but the 6 sports centres, the new park that was built, the spin-off of that was the tremendous increase in employment in the construction industry. Something like 16,000 jobs were created in the construction industry. On one occasion, the local construction union, UCAT, who used to supply labour, ran out of joiners. When firms contacted them and said, we need some joiners, they said, we can't give you any, they're all working for the Liverpool City Council.
And on the day of the budget, it was quite clear. We either set a legal budget, we make redundancies, we stop building the houses, we close down those schools, the sports centres go, it all stops now after year 2, or we carry on with the programme that you elected us to do. And what had happened over those 2 years before we set the illegal budget was that in those 2 years the Labour vote in the city had gone up massively. The turnout had gone from being like 28-29% to sometimes 60, 70, 80% in some of the wards. Some of the wards that had a terrible turnout and old councils that were rubbish suddenly have active councillors building the houses, getting them involved, building schools, creating sports centres, creches, all sorts were going on. So the turnout was going. So you're saying, well, if more people are coming out to vote for us and more people are coming on the street to support us, maybe that is what they want us to do.
We basically came face to face with the public, and that's how we did it. If you want to hide from the public, then you've got something to hide. And we didn't have anything to hide, no matter what the press said.
A generation ago, a Labour leader came to our conference to condemn the behaviour of a Labour council in Liverpool. Today I come here proud of this great city and proud of our Labour council.
And you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around the city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers.
There was never redundancy notice issues. They were not. They were statements of intent. What the letters said was that because of the fact that there's no funding coming into the city by January, we won't have any money to pay you. But the whole thing was a tactic. It was a worked out tactic after consultation with the local authority to trade unions, who supported it. The GMB, for instance, voted 90% in support of that tactic. Nalgo supported the tactic. The teachers supported the tactic. All of the consultation with the trade unions said, yeah, that's a good tactic. Because the tactic was that if the government saw that Liverpool intended to cut its costs, the money would start flowing back into the city. That was the tactical. On reflection, the wrong tactic. But nevertheless, that was the honest tactic at the time. And some of the councillors Kinnock supported were making real redundancies in their own areas. In fact, a fortnight after his infamous speech, his infamous conference speech, in one of his Welsh local authorities, they in fact sacked 2,000 workers, including many members of the fire brigade. Not a peep from Kinnock. We were expecting to make a ferocious attack upon that council. The silence was deafening. And in fact, that whole business was used as a weapon against us. Now, if I had that time again, I wouldn't adopt that tactic. I'll tell you quite frankly, because whilst it was it was something we attempted to do, because we were isolated. We had the pressure from the whole of the media on us, the pressure from the capitalist class, and we were trying to manoeuvre our way out of this situation. Not a single worker was made redundant.
The Labour Party leadership at that time were part of the attack against us, and we ended in a situation where we were facing in the same court on the same day in the High Court in London. We were challenging the Labour Party's right to expel some of us in the 47 from being in the Labour Party, and the district auditor's right to discharge us as councillors. But that's not to say the Labour Party as a whole was, that the leadership was, but when I appealed to conference against my expulsion from the Labour Party, I was the last person to have the right to appeal to conference about being expelled from the Labour Party. As I left the rostrum, Eric Heffer, who was my MP, publicly and in front of the cameras came down and picked me up in a great big bear hug, and there were a lot of other people who were supportive in the same way. So, I mean, we had fantastic MPs in Liverpool at the time with Terry Fields and Eric Heffer and Eddie Lloyden. Bob Parry, we really did have excellent support from the MPs. But the attack on us as councillors and the attack on us as Labour Party members did happen at the same time, and it wasn't accidental. And it did help, really. It helped build a mood against us to a certain extent in the country.
It was more really a political issue between Thatcher and the Tory government and what's seen as Labour and militant in Liverpool. And the big disappointment for me was the Labour Party nationally coming in behind the Tories for their own ends, really, to get rid of activists and left-wing activists in the whole of the country through use of, if you're in the militant, if you've spoken to someone in the militant, if you've seen talking to anyone in the militant, then you're all expelled from the Labour Party.
The militant was serious about fighting for these policies. We didn't believe it was just sufficient to refer to them during a May Day speech or at a party conference. We believed it was important to implement them in concrete terms, in a way which benefited working class people.
It shows you how frightened the powers that be were of them, of how they represented a mood at that time and the amount of people they represented who really felt they were pushing for a serious change in the system and society as a whole.
And one of the things I said to Kinnock was, in a Labour Party conference, I said to Kinnock was, come and debate this issue in the biggest hall you can find in Liverpool, and we'll take what that meeting says. But we're not prepared to take some manoeuvred and organisational methods of removing us from the positions we've been elected to by the Liverpool City Council, by the Liverpool people in the City Council election.
It was worked out that because of the cuts that the national government had made in funding to local authorities, something like 32 million quid had been stolen from Liverpool City Council, and we were demanding that money back. If we'd been given that money back, then nothing would have, all the things that happened in Liverpool wouldn't have happened. But those laws are created by people who have a vested interest in not seeing people's needs met. So the council took the attitude, using a slogan that had come from popular council in the 1920s, better to break the law than break the poor. They broke the law in order to provide the jobs, the houses, the schools that were needed for people of Liverpool.
The Tory government's come back, got the district auditor, an unelected individual who no one had heard of and no one's seen of him since. So what we did, we went through the court system and ended up in the House of Lords, and in the end we found that we were guilty. It ended up something not far off £500,000. And what we did was we just appealed to trade union branches, trade unions as a whole, and individuals. It got to the stage where, when we'd sort of paid the surcharge, the money was still coming in, and we couldn't stop people sending money. So we had to close the account down so no one could put money in. And we had something like £45,000 left when we'd done everything, and we give that to the Liverpool dockers when they were on strike.
If you read anything of Lenin, read the July days, and that was what it was like in Liverpool. You had this horrendous deluge of media, constantly things that were going on in Liverpool. People's names and addresses were printed when things happened. Safe houses were offered to people if they would only give information to the Echo. You know, we could see better than anyone some of the things that were happening. Lots of breakups. People were debarred. They couldn't get hire purchase agreements when they were removed from the council. You're blacklisted and you're bankrupted. So people couldn't get work. So most people didn't leave the city, lived in the city, but had to try and find work outside.
I really believe newspapers, but you don't know where, you don't expect them to actually lie. You just think they might not tell the truth, or they might not get it completely right. They might not tell you everything. But that was when I learned, and I've never bought the Echo since, as no one in Liverpool buys the Sun, and hopefully never will. But I've never bought the Echo since either, and several other papers I'd never purchased, because when I read them and I witnessed and knew the people or the events, and I read what they said, it was total fabrication.
And you still get those lies, so that Liverpool is still, to a certain extent, Liverpool politics is still haunted by what happened then. And it's haunted because the right wing of the movement are frightened that it could happen again. It was a taster of what could happen if working people could take power into their own hands in terms of making things change. They're frightened that that could happen again, and it's useful to use that as a bogeyman, if you like, of be careful because the militants will come and get you. So it's important to kind of have down the truth of what took place then.
And it was created in the national press that it was, a bad place full of sort of like drug dealers and people who steal from you and don't go there, they'll murder you in your beds and whatever. And yet for people who were living here, it was a city that had been decimated with unemployment. And here was someone standing up for them to say, we can make a difference if we stand together. So there were lots of sort of big demonstrations, if you support the council. There was one on, I think it was the 28th or 29th of March, 1984, that must have been. And I think there was about 30,000 people attended that. Why can't we have nice homes and nice parks and nice sports centres and nice schools? Surely that's what it's all about.
The Tories might say we're all in this together, but they've never been in it. But we're all in it together, and it's trying to get that across to people. The majority of people are working class people. They don't own, they don't control, they only have what little they've got. So it's to try and get that feeling that, if that happens to somebody else, that directly affects me, and I've got to do something about. Not on your own. People are going to have to learn to fight for themselves and their community, and they're going to have to learn all over again that they can't do it on their own, that they've got to have other people with them.
And in terms of the jobs of this is after 25 years of the 47 being removed from office. There is a third of the number of jobs now working for the local authority than it did. It was 30,000 when we left office, 31,000, and it's now less than 10,000.
The kind of recessions we had in the 70s and the early 90s, this is nothing compared to what we're going through now. This is to save the system. This is to save the system. So people have to suffer to save the system because we didn't cause the crisis.
It's a time that people are becoming aware again, I believe. And it's a time that people are under attack. Jobs are being lost, hours being cut, wages being cut. You fought for your pay rise. You went on strike if necessary for a pay rise. Never did I imagine that people would vote for a pay cut for themselves. And it's happening all over the country now in vain attempts to try and stop redundancies or stop closures. They're becoming more aware. They're going to start fighting. And I think it's going to be an interesting time to come and an interesting time to be involved in.
You know, we've got to be seen to be supporting one another at every level, because it's going to be us against them.
Anyone who does anything to awaken people's awareness and to inspire. I think that is the most important, is to inspire people again to do something that, if they look back and see that it's possible, if they can look back on the 47 and all the people involved at that time and see how they'd done it, that it was ordinary people, it was people, you, me, everyone, you know, people who've worked and struggled, people with families, people who've known what it's like to be without.
If you say, what did the 80s give you? Well, they gave my mum and dad a house. They gave me a voice, and I met the most marvellous people. No, it's to see people who know what their rights are and are prepared to stand up and shout and have a go. And if you can be involved in any of that, then nothing like it.
I wouldn't have thought there was any better way to grow up and learn what the world's about than for me growing up during that time, being a teenager. You know, it certainly made me look at my life differently. I think that's what people have got to realise, that they can have an effect, one person.
Well, it was a great period, and I know it's a case of it wasn't a choice, you had to do it. But I went to an ordinary secondary modern school, Earl Road, which by any standards, I think it was just a place where kids had to go because the law said they had to go to a place called school. There was very little academic stuff going on there. But when I got involved with the movement, I was going all around the country speaking at meetings, trade union conferences, Labour Party conferences, and, you know, it was speaking to sometimes maybe 20 people, hundreds, thousands of people.
I think if I look back and smile, I just think of all the people met from literally all over the world. America, everywhere in the world you could name country-wise, most of them at some stage over a 3-year period came to Liverpool to see what was going on with this council, because it was the talk of the world for a very short period in time.
The friendships that we forged in those times, which are very, very strong. The admiration you can have for so many people for their courage. But it's really nice when you see the houses. You just go past those houses and think, yeah, we built them. They're ours, we got them built.
There is an alternative. We forced concessions out of the Tory government. And if the Labour Party had stayed with us on a national basis, we could have won completely. There's no need for the councils to pass on those cuts. If they stand together, refusing to pass any of those cuts, any of those attacks onto ordinary working people, then they can defeat the government.
Baggy! message is clear for you people up here. You are not alone. There was a story once written called A Tale of Two Cities. Liverpool and London is a tale of two cities. Mrs. Thatcher, read that story. In the original Tale of Two Cities, someone lost their head. In this tale, I'm sure this government is going to lose its head and Labour's going to return.
Labour Council has voted to protect jobs, to stop gate setting the roof and to build houses, and when they do that, everyone complains, so we should vote yes to support the strike.
And let's show this vicious Tory government that we're not prepared to let and air commissioners walk into this city and take away our jobs.
As a building worker for the Liverpool City Council, the fact that we've got a Labour-controlled City Council means a lot. I mean, the Tory government have already let it be known that they wish to bring in private contractors. They've given legislation out saying that if the DLO doesn't make profit within 3 years, then she's going to scrap it. I mean, my job's on the line, you know what I mean? As well as like 10,000 private sector workers now involved building the 3,600 council houses.
Tories aren't providing any jobs, and neither are the businesses. There is some hope for the future in Liverpool, because the council has been providing jobs, particularly for young people. It's been given proper YTS schemes with guaranteed job at the end and proper rates of pay.
We took votes at all the colleges where city councillors were speaking, and there was a massive vote in the majority, for the city council. The students weren't going to stay home, they were going to be active, they were coming down to the strike headquarters, they were going to come out and leaflet their streets, get out in buckets and set up city council support groups.
Brothers and sisters, this demonstration today has proved beyond any shadow of doubt that the unity and solidarity of the working class of Liverpool has not been broken or impaired by the vicious attacks that have been made from every quarter, from the media, from some sectors of our movement, from the Tory government and the world at large. Brothers and sisters, let anybody who yesterday thought that because of the fact that the majority of people did not vote for all-out strike action, thought that in some way they defeated Liverpool, let them just look at the size of this demonstration. This demonstration here today is not a rape, it's not a post-mortem, but is yet another springboard for the next round of the campaign that eventually is going to secure victory over this particular Tory government. And let them understand that.
Maggie!
Can you tell me why you're doing this? Yeah, because we want to fight back against the Tories who are attacking this city. Because we've got enough people on the dole. We've got about 80% youth unemployment in this city. And I know what it feels like to be on the dole now. So I'm fighting the Tories so they can't put any more people on the dole in this city. Because the Liverpool City Council are defending jobs and services, and I'm prepared to fight with the City Council to defend these jobs and services.